We're searching across North America to deliver the latest event ideas, inspiration, and resources directly to your inbox. If you don't already receive the BizBash buzz, what are you waiting for? Sign up for our newsletter today at bizbash.com/BizBashBuzz.
Are you a follower?
Okay, so we're gonna call the ad.
Welcome to GatherGeeks, a podcast by BizBash, the place where people passionate about meetings and events come together. Here's your host, BizBash chairman and founder, David Adler.
Today we are talking to Nick Simonette from the Czarnowski Collective, who is a leader in a collaborative response from the event industry called LiveForLife. He and the Czarnowski Collective team quickly realized the opportunity to help fight COVID-19 was bigger than just them. It would require manpower and resources from across the country and had the potential to get thousands of live event pros back to work. So Nick and his team hit the phones. The first calls were made to George P. Johnson and Exploring, two companies Czarnowski often competes with for business. Together, these three companies formed LiveForLife, a coalition which now consists of over 200 plus live event companies. The coalition builds structured solutions and offers services ranging from lighting to plumbing, resources, staffing to decontamination, and anything that might be needed to create, manage, and maintain field hospitals and testing centers. We spoke to Nick about what they learned and how those learnings will impact the future of the industry, including everything from timed entrances, event traffic flow, antimicrobial lighting, gesture-based technology, to turning hand washing into event activations. We also discussed the new relationship between large trade show organizers and corporate marketing initiatives, as well as what is the new definition of ROI. The 70-year-old Czarnowski Collective is a major experiential firm with fingers in all aspects of the business, from strategy, creative, and execution. They're headquartered in Chicago, and they have global offices. They focus primarily on auto, tech, and health industries, and they interact with consumers in engaging, memorable ways through events, conferences, roadshows, pop-ups, and even more. You can see all of their work at everything from CES to Comic-Con to South by Southwest to the New York Auto Show. Let's have a listen to Nick.
We're now in this world where you are dealing with your competitors in a much different way. Explain what's going on in terms of how you're trying to change the world for the better with the collaboration of all of your competitors right now. Talk about that.
Sure. So you're referring to LiveForLife.
LiveForLife.
So back on March 13th, the president held a conference, and he talked about a press conference, and he was talking about mobile testing, and he identified 4 major retailers. And in that, during the middle of that speech, I reached out to our other sister agency, Assembly, and said, hey, can we provide tents for this? Because back then it's March and there's snow everywhere and there's wind and rain. And how are these people going to manage this? And that's literally the spark for us to where we started thinking of the ideation of what ultimately came to be LiveForLife. Pushed that a couple of weeks out after we started generating lists of people for outreach, as well as kind of pivoting and changing from testing tents to mobile hospitals to hospital rooms that are inside of a convention center. I was sitting here in this office with this guitar over my shoulder thinking this is larger than just one organization. While it's something that could sustain us, Czarnowski, we really need to sustain the entire ecosystem of the industry itself. So I reached out to a bunch of friends and said, hey, I know that we've been frenemies and competitors, but here's what I'm thinking. And from that, had an amazing response of 200 plus strong. And during that developmental process, we developed a core group, which is George P. Johnson and Exploring. But it was the ideation that came up here from us here at Czarnowski, saying that we need to reach out to a larger audience because it's greater than just one entity.
And what's the product of this that you've developed?
So it's not necessarily a product per se, it's a philosophical platform and a methodology of producing these elements that are needed. As we started looking through this, everyone, and it didn't matter which contemporary I was speaking with, originally they were talking about, well, we can use our own wall systems and we can use our own cabinets. Well, at this time, the information was coming out so fast and furious. And in fact, I believe right about that time, they had found an RNA strand on the Diamond Princess that had lasted for over 17 days. Thinking about that and whether or not it was a symptomatic or asymptomatic culture, no one wants to bring that back into their facility. Not to mention the sheer volume at that time. In fact, Governor Cuomo said that each hospital in the state had to increase their capacity by 50%. Well, there's a logistical challenge with that because they're using every bit of real estate that they have for a fixed-based operation. So how would we do this? So from that, we on the Czarnowski side started designing wall systems, panel systems, connection systems, airflow systems, anything you could think of that would be readily available across the US, that we could all deploy quickly, and that could go in the bin once it's done, and none of us had to take this back into our facilities. This was also around the time where we had heard on the news that the pandemic response in the hospitals they built in China, all of the metal that was used had to be smelted and re-extruded because they didn't want to take it back. So this was just our way of figuring out how to develop an entire system. So that's on the physical side of things. We also started talking about who do we reach out to? Because at this time, we were reaching out to hospital systems, local and state EMS, FEMA on the federal level, Army Corps of Engineers, National Guard. No one really knew where to go. And I don't know that this is actually accurate, but my impression is the fact that our EMS is based upon flood, fire, hurricane, tornado, but wasn't necessarily set up for public health in large scale. I was speaking with a remediation company back in this time, and they really encapsulated it for me and said, this is like having a hurricane in every zip code of the country. Everything's going to be overwhelmed. So again, sharing that information back through the LiveForLife Coalition to where everyone is learning from each other. You have to give, and it's the spirit of reciprocity. You got to give to get. And if we could just help one person clear a hurdle that we had already faced or vice versa, it just made our response so much better.
And so all these different companies now are developing products based on this knowledge. Is that
seemingly, yes?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So they're all using the sort of input that you guys got. It was like a creative brief almost.
Yep, pretty much.
In the non-healthcare world.
Right.
What products do you think are the ones that are going to be legacy products that you're going to be able to use at events that you've thought of because of this period of intense innovation? So, I've seen some of your models of things that it looks like you're having, but I wanted to make sure that it's accurate, that the way we look at entering an event, leaving an event, being safe in an event are some of the products that are going to come out of this, whether they're done or still coming. What's daydream for us, and tell us what's accurate.
Well, the true daydream would be at least that there's a cure, there's a vaccination, and we can get back to hugging and communing and standing shoulder to shoulder. But in light of that utopian, output, what's going to wind up happening is let's take it just from the very smallest portion of when you arrive at an event, right? So pull back and forget about your air travel and sitting on an airplane seat and grabbing your luggage and getting your hotel. I think that what's going to wind up happening, and I was in the discussion earlier today, is that there's going to be a bunch of this that is transparent that you see. And the analogy that I used was TSA post 9/11, right? It was something that was a little wonky, shaky, not necessarily certain how we were going to get through this system. How are we going to consolidate everything down to 3-ounce bottles in a quart-sized bag? But then there's a bit of opacity once you get beyond that there are a lot of safety measures that are taking place inside of the airport themselves. And part of that is to make sure that you're not creating fear, but everyone knows that there's the perception of safety. I think the same thing is going to happen with events. I think at the very beginning, it may be a little shaky, right? How do we distance ourselves? How do we communicate? How do we take the formal greeting of just shaking hands, or dare I say the people that, like myself, that call themselves huggers, right? So how do we do that and make these human connections? I think it's going to be a little, again, shaky at first, but I think as people become more comfortable with the new normal, it'll just be automatic. I think you're going to find that where touch screens were on the rise, they're maybe now gesture-based. Those technologies are out there. It's up to companies like ours and in our industry, especially when we're looking at large audiences, how to use gesture-based controls that seems intuitive. So that's one way of doing it.
Have you developed? Have you developed any of this yet? Or do you have types?
Years ago, yes. So we have been using gesture-based technology for many years. Whether that is some sort of a fixture or a reactrix-based wall that is using kind of the Xbox scanners, if you will, and then the tiles on the screen are reacting to the person themselves. We are rapidly thinking about how to utilize those technologies in intuitive ways, whether that is from a 4-foot distance or a 4-inch distance away from it. I think that by looking at what's in gaming, as you mentioned earlier, that will be a platform that a lot of people will repurpose. So that's in the engagement in a space. But as you're walking through these environments, there are companies like Halo Cell that are out there that have a hydrogen peroxide mist, and I don't want to speak too in depth on it because I only know it at a surface level, but that takes a little bit of remediation and pathogens out of the air to a certain degree in a safe way, utilizing UVC lighting that's antimicrobial. I see those things happening as well. Again, those are the things that are in the background. But as people are registering, instead of going up to a traditional registration queue, maybe you're doing it through your phone. And then from your home, you're able to print your own badge. And there's personalization. And whether you're wearing a PPE or not, maybe there's another portion of it. But I see that a lot of those technology solutions are going to be available, not to mention paired with masks, gloves that are located around the space. Allowing people, it takes the approach of meeting people where they are. And if they don't feel safe or they feel as though they need a mask or some sort of PPE, let's deliver that for them. Because at the end of the day,
have you figured out any timed entrance technology or activations that, because a lot of hotels are with their pre-function space are really worried that you can't have everyone arriving now at the same time. So there's got to be all sorts of timing issues and timing sort of activations where you put people in holding areas and the pre-function space becomes more important than ever at a trade show or any type of activation. You can't have people waiting in line.
No, you can't. And that you don't want an experience gap either, right? You want to make sure that it's continuous. To say that we've put a lot of thought towards that, this is a multi-headed thing that we're trying to wrap our arms around. Much like LiveForLife, the information was changing on a day-by-day, if not hour-by-hour basis. And it becomes these aha moments. So, now I get it. Let me kind of switch and change a little bit. I think once we get back to live, we're going to figure out some of the things that we couldn't see around the corner. Right. But being able to have a process to measure it, right? You need to measure what's working. There also needs to be a public sentiment approach, right? How are people engaging? How do they feel? Do they feel comfortable? And then responding quickly, either the next day or the next show, whatever that happens to be.
Have you thought about how do you make washing your hands fun? How do you make going to the bathroom at a trade show fun or interesting? I mean, it seems like there's all these experiential moments that people have that have opportunity in them, actually.
Sure. David, I may take that from you. I love it. How to make going to the bathroom or wash your hands fun. That's what we need. But you're absolutely right. And those are the things. It's all about top of mind. It's just having it there in a subtle way that doesn't appear intrusive, that doesn't evoke and connote fear. Right? It's just our normal practice.
Did you do you have any aha moments that you got from the program that we were just talking about in terms of like this week? Did we learn anything new around the corner that we didn't know? Is it that fresh, or are we sort of now in a new normal?
There's so many aha moments. As you start as an agency like ours, we immerse ourselves in brands just to figure out their unique identification and what makes them, what's the preferential value for them, and how do you play that? So during the process of exploring hospital rooms, there is a traffic flow, a human queuing that is part of hospitals in a singular direction so that there's no cross-contamination, getting into negative pressure and whatever that means, and trying to really understand what BSL biosafety levels are. And not that we could reproduce that in a temporary environment, but by having the knowledge of it allowed us to think a little differently about the protocol. And I think that's also going to be part of, the new normal to live events. What does that traffic flow look like? Does it go in one direction? I know that one of the real estate developers out there pushed something out with regards to the office of the future. And you can only go around the office, clockwise and or counterclockwise, and then there's distancing. And once you start digging into that and seeing that this protocol has been in place for small industries for a very long time, I could see this happening as one-way streets, if you will, in live events.
We get it. Event pros around the world are shifting their event strategies to virtual and hybrid events, and it's nearly impossible to sort through all the different platforms and programs. Well, it's your lucky day. The BizBash Virtual Event Guide does the work for you, highlighting only the top partners for everything from all-in-one virtual event platforms to virtual team building activities. Get started now at bizbashvirtualeventguide.com.
What's going to happen at the trade show in terms of flows and exhibits and things like that? What does a trade show booth feel like or look like in the future? I know you're in that area as well, but what does it?
Yeah,
does it change? Does it change? Is it like, how do you daydream about that?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's all fresh.
Yeah,
I think that it's going to be where let's take a theater, right? It was about, I want to pack as many people into this theater as possible. And how do you replicate that in a more open environment? How do you give people, maybe there's maybe it's app-based and someone is watching it on their own personal phone, and then that becomes trackable for the brand. This really goes back to utilizing the platforms and the technologies that are there, giving people access to get in and interact as they feel comfortable, and taking in that human effect, right? Because at the end of the day, we're communal, right? We want to congregate, whether it's with our family, our friends, our colleagues, our industries. We want to network. We want to push the boundaries with our careers, right? And grow and accelerate. And that's one of the big parts that live events produce, is that you're standing in someone's space, and whether you're connecting over sports, art, news, region, that's what that's the best part about events themselves. So the way they come back is very much a little more open, a little more digestible in a way that is not necessarily self-serve, meaning that you're just going to walk around in a gallery, but it may allow you to engage in the way that you feel comfortable. There's been this little wall between what happens in the digital and the virtual space and then what happens in the live space, where we see there's the power of connecting those two to where they become fulcrums and levers to push people from live to digital and back and forth, keeping the conversation going, as opposed to having a singular location at a single point in time, say a trade show or a live event, We want to make sure that conversation and that energy momentum keeps going and it leads into the next live event. We see that everything should be connected and how you're pushing it through the individual tactics and strategies.
Are you seeing what's happening today as a temporary situation, though, in terms of, do you think face-to-face is going to come back where it was, or is it completely different? Are we like smoking some bad crack if we think it's going to come back the way it is?
I don't think it's going to come back the way it was. I think what it's going to do is it's going to come back more connected. I do believe that it will come back. I believe that from the standpoint of taking the virtual and live, we were on a trajectory and an intersection point that was probably going to happen had this not happened in the next 5 to 7 years as people started adopting, and new generational members are coming in that are digital natives that understand the power of virtual. We saw that again as about a 5-year trajectory point of connection. Because of what's happened now, it's just sped it up. We truly believe that now there's going to be this companion piece with each side of it that makes it more powerful, because there are situational aspects that will happen. So if you can remember when the volcano erupted back in 2008, 2009, there were major shows that were happening in Europe and it shut down all travel.
Oh, yeah.
Well, these brands that spent a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of energy to only be shut down based upon a natural occurrence. And there was very few venues or platforms in order to push that out. So those are sunk costs that are lost. Now they're trying to find other ways. This has happened before. This is just the most extreme on a global standpoint. In order to mitigate these types of things from happening in the future, there needs to be this parity. It's almost, dare I say, an insurance policy. You have a $100 live event. Why not put something that has a value of 5%, $5 that can insure just in case someone can't show up, whether that is travel rules and restrictions based upon their own company or just schedules don't match up. You still want them to have that experience. You still want them to see your product solutions and services in a unique circumstance.
But you're still optimistic that the fourth quarter is going to be active.
We are. We're optimistic that fourth quarter is going to be active. And it's because of the things that were our requests from our customers, net new requests from people that want to know more, want to do things differently, that are looking at different partnerships.
And what does that look like? I mean, do you have any examples that you can share that are unique partnerships that you sort of see with, you're sort of in the catbird seat. You're developing ideas, you're pitching ideas, you're hearing clients' feedback. Are you seeing really crazy new stuff that is blowing your mind?
The playbook has been thrown out the window, and I obviously can't mention any specific brands by name through confidentiality or any of our perspective. But I think everyone is looking for something a little different, right? They're not looking to go back to what was. It's about creating something that is unique, enduring, engaging, that can transfer from one platform to the next. It's no longer a singular portal or throughput, say, just digital, just live, just a road show. It is how do all these things come together? And I keep using the term intersection points, is because there is a convergence of all of this that is coming together to make it more natural and intuitive, but engaging. And it's not the same version of the stuff they've done before.
Is there a new ROI?
There will be, right? So there's a lot of different metrics. I mean, your ROI and your tracking abilities in virtual are vastly different than what you can track live. Right? Live has some empirical points, but a lot of it anecdotal. Virtual has many empirical points, but very few that are anecdotal. But really, what it gets down to is what is the direct corollary to brand perception, brand and sales lift. That's the things that you can start tracking and tying back to these engagements. And no one engagement is the silver bullet. It's a combination of a fully rounded portfolio.
Because you now can drive things in millions of different ways. You don't have to be part of CES necessarily for a client. So it's kind of a different power shift, it looks like.
So by and large, the brands have been in charge. And at Czarnowski, we've always taken this approach of being kind of venue or event agnostic, right? Let's think about what are the best ways to get your message out there, connect with your constituency. There may be a little more of an appetite for that, for people to listen now. What does pop-up retail look like? What do micro events look like? What does participation on a national level, virtual? All of these things are going to become part of the entire landscape. And they may shift dollars from one platform to the other, but it's really about the narrative and storytelling and connectivity. Because some of these things are just a byproduct of the story, of the value proposition, right? And we need to reach people in a methodology that is consistent, that is intuitive to them, but also speaks to their learning styles. You have auditory learners, you have visual learners, kinesthetic learners. Each one of these different platforms provides that. So let's speak to people and speak to our citizens, our community, in a way that makes sense.
Instead of going to a traditional agency, you're much better off going to an event agency, because you touch people, you talk to people, where agencies are talking ads and they don't really connect with people in many cases. I don't know if that's the right analogy, but it seems like we're in the era of the event marketing platform as opposed to just the agency world, the event advertising agency world.
Well, exactly. I mean, and there's tons of data out there that says that experiential engagements are much better than just passive kind of broadcast. Again, another one of those things that we were destined to connect. It's setting a top line narrative, brand, tagline, and then we are the extension of that. Where it's thinking agnostic of medium. It's not just traditional advertising, whether that's television, radio, digital. It's really, how is this pulling through to other aspects of just connecting with people? Because we're getting so many messages. How do you stand out and create something that's unique? I mean, people want to be part of a community. I'm a brand loyalist, and you're a brand loyalist. So
there's a world that I live in with the organizers and the brands, and they're nervous that people are going to do it on their own and they don't need the organizers as much anymore. That it is this, are the big trade shows as important as they've been in the past, or do you think that clients and brands will want to have sort of keep their own fate, sort of like, so that they can use more things? And it's been happening all for a long time, but is this supercharging it?
Sure. Well, some brands are definitely migrating away from large events, but let's think about what events have. Events have the attendee base. They have the constituency. When you're a brand and you want to reach those people, that is a very target-rich environment, even if it's segmented. So I don't necessarily see large events going away. What I do see is that people are going to use them for the power and to the extent to get to other offshoots. And that's not a bad thing. It's no different than having a platform, a digital platform inside of a CES environment that a brand is representing. But the other side is to push them to your own channel. So using that as this push-pull. So I don't necessarily see these large events going away, because then you're trying to recreate the momentum in the constituency. It's easy when you have 175,000 people that are showing up to CES. That's the value of CES. Not to mention that you have press that's there. So therefore there's the press value of that.
Right.
I just don't see it going away. But it does put it on organizers and associations to move into the future that encapsulates this convergence approach.
But do you think that the organizers are going to, do you think that the cost benefit analysis for an exhibitor, for example, that it's going to cost more to do a trade show because of all of the safety things that are being added, of all of the things that you need to do to make it worthwhile at least at this juncture? Do you think that brands will recognize that and want to pay up for it?
David, it may. However, what it might do is it might get brands and organizers to focus a little bit more. There are large spaces, there are small spaces. Inside of those spaces, some of them may be superfluous moving into the future, where budgets are probably going to remain the same, if not become flat for the next 6 to 18 months, depending upon now the economy. If you're looking at the stock market, seems to be doing really well, but you have to be conservative in these times to make sure that you can endure. It's going to require brands, associations, and companies like ours to think differently, to understand that there's a level of safety, nuance, addition that cannot take away from the brand experience. So I think it's going to require all of us to be a little bit smarter.
I think that we're trying to show that, that the center of gravity is shifting a little bit to firms like yours, actually. Is it creativity? Is it budget, creativity, ingenuity? Like, what are the main ingredients to engage people today, no matter what it is, the broadest possible way? I mean, is it humor? Is it fact?
I think it really depends upon who you're speaking with, right? If your audience is highly scientific, it's data points, it's empirical data. If something is more lifestyle focused, it's presenting something in a way that people can see themselves in. And all of that takes creativity, ingenuity. We've said for a long time, constraints require and inspire creativity. It's those constraints that make us creative, right? Whether if it's a fixed space, fixed budget, fixed time, fixed narrative, that requires us to be highly creative, because then that has to translate to a business metric. One thing I tell people that are part of our team is just be present. Don't look too far in the future. Don't look back. Be present, because right now the present control has power, it has possibility, it has creativity, it has control. Just be in control of your present moment and take the next right step.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or your favorite podcast app. We can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Player FM, Google Play, and Pocket Cast. Be sure to leave us a rating and review. It helps others discover the GatherGeeks podcast. We'd also love to hear from you. You can leave feedback on Twitter @GatherGeeks or leave us an email, gathergeeks@bizbash.com. We hope you'll join us again for the next episode of GatherGeeks. Until then, gather on.